What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Game Informer Show, a weekly podcast covering the video game industry. Join us each and every Thursday for a discussion of the latest gaming news, reviews, and exclusive reveals with Game Informer staff and special guests from around the industry. I am your host, Marcus Stewart. I am joined by Kyle Hilliard. Hello.
Hello. It's cover reveal week. It's exciting.
It sure is. And joining us for this monumental week is Charles Hart. How you doing?
Hello, I'm good. I'm in a new house. It's Charles' house reveal week too.
Oh yeah, we synced those up perfectly. How is the new house?
It's cool. I got my. I'll do a slight camera adjustment. I got my gamer shelf set up here. We got most of my different games. Kyle and I did a stream for Luigi's Mansion 2, and Nintendo sent us some stuff, including a Luigi hat, which I have put
Wait, did they really?
On this big stuffed elephant I have here.
That's good.
I've also got my cat.
What's the cat's name?
This is Kit.
Kit.
And then down here we have Lando.
Oh, I thought you were going to say cat.
Kit and cat.
Kit, it is Kit the cat. They're kind of both named after Star Wars characters.
Yeah,
Lando is definitely named after a Star Wars character. When we got the second cat, I thought Kit the cat was a cute thing. But there's also a Jedi named Kit Fisto.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So it happens to line up there.
Are you a particularly big Kit Fisto fan? Where if someone calls you out, like, oh man, tell me your favorite Kit Fisto moment.
You know, I actually did like Kit Fisto as a kid because my favorite color is green, and he's got green skin and a green lightsaber, and I was like, can't get better than this, man.
And he smiles real big in episode 2, right? He goes,
yeah. The good Kit Fisto moment is in the 2D animated Star Wars Clone Wars special, and he has a whole underwater fight sequence that's really cool. That was my Kit Fisto favorite moment.
Right. Okay, by that criteria, is Yoda, you're really big on Yoda, who's also green and has a green lightsaber?
He is green, that's a good point. I don't identify with Yoda because he's so small and I'm very tall, so it's
fair.
We're not on the same page.
What about when he's on Luke's shoulder and he's a backpack?
Well, then it's I feel like Luke, because I'd be carrying people like a backpack.
Exactly, and who wants to feel like Luke Skywalker?
Right.
Well, thanks for checking out, guys. Before we hop into a very big show, of course, you can support the Game Informer show as well as Game Informer in general by subscribing to a physical issue of the magazine. Of course, you can do that by going to subscribe.gameinformer.com, and you can sign up for a 10 issues a year to come to your house, 10 physical issues, but it also gets you the digital magazine for just $19.91. That's less than $2 an issue, and each issue is 84 pages of goodness, including the new cover that we're going to be talking about very shortly. Or you can double up on that by getting a 2-year subscription for $34.99, which of course would get you 20 physical issues sent to your house a year. It's a great way to support Game Informer directly, keep us around, and it keeps us smiling like we're all a bunch of Kit Fistos if you do it. There we go. If you're watching the video, Kyle just did his best Kit Fisto.
It was horrible.
And I was convinced. Yes. But yeah, speaking of Game Informer magazine, our next cover story has been announced, and it is the casting of Frank Stone, a spooky cover this month. And it's spooky. Also, I believe, and Kyle, you might know better because you've been here longer, is this the first Supermassive game that has ever been on the cover?
Yes, I'm almost certain it is, because I remember Matt sort of presenting it and being like, hey, what do you think of this? And my main reaction was I like the idea of getting a Supermassive game on the cover. I think that would be really cool. So yeah, because Until Dawn was not on the cover, the Quarry was not on the cover. Yeah. First Supermassive game, yeah.
Yeah, and this is a cover story that I wrote. I flew up to Montreal, Quebec, Canada with Alex Van Aken, and we visited Behavior Interactive, who is the creator, developer, publisher of Dead by Daylight, of which this game is based on. If you're not familiar with the casting of Frank Stone, it is a collaboration between Behavior and Supermassive, where it is a single-player cinematic choice-driven adventure game, very much in the vein of Until Dawn or The Quarry, but it is set within the Dead by Daylight universe. However, it's telling an original story. It doesn't feature any of the existing killers from Dead by Daylight. Instead, it features a new murderer named Frank Stone. It takes place in this small kind of Pacific Northwestern town of Cider Hills in the summer of 1980, and it stars
Alan Wake hadn't gotten there yet, right? Like that was like he hadn't shown up yet.
In the year 1980, no, not yet. I guess he would have been alive though, right?
He was still in New York. I think he was writing books at that point, right? Yeah.
In 1980, would he be like a kid?
No, he would have been a kid.
No, he was like a published author in like 2000. I'm gonna look up Alan Wake's age.
Yeah.
Alan Wake 1 was 2010, I think.
Yeah, it takes place in the year it came out, and he was already like in his 30s at least, right?
It was probably like let's see. We're getting way off track here. But
Yeah.
He was born in 1977, so I guess you're right. You guys are right. I'm wrong. In the 80s, in the early 80s, he would have been very young. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, maybe he's just a good writer. Maybe he's writing just little short stories. But
he was older than me. I forget that like characters in fiction are like my age now. You know, I spent so much of my life being like, they're way older than me. But no, we're catching up. We're about on the same. You know, I'm like older than Han Solo at this point. You know.
Oh, don't say that. But anyways, back to Frank Stone. We visited the studio. I got to interview lead developers from both studios, Behavior and Supermassive, to learn about how the collaboration came to be, how it was like working with each other, because they, both studios make two very different styles of games. Dead by Daylight being an asymmetrical multiplayer game, Until Dawn, and at least Supermassive's horror games. They've done other things besides horror, but that's probably what they're best known for at this point. Very cinematic, just choice-driven stuff. Like they've gotten more and more sort of like, I guess, I don't know if interactive is the word I want to use, but like maybe a little less on rails with each release since the Until Dawn came out. And so it was fun just hearing them like just sit down and sort of like break down like who contacted who, like whose idea was it? Because like and it was fun because Alex and I sort of represented two sides of the same coin, where Alex is like a huge Dead by Daylight fan. Like he plays it regularly. He knows all about that universe, but is not really played Supermassive's games because he's not a big horror guy. As he's said in his own words, he's a big chicken when it comes to horror. Whereas I generally enjoy Supermassive stuff, and I am a big horror guy. But until this trip, I'd only played Dead by Daylight pre-release at, I think it was the first E3 where it was demoed in 2016. Like I remember walking in and it had a big booth with a big line, and I was like, oh, what's this thing? I guess I'll get in line for it. But other than that, the first time I ever really played it was in the week or two leading up to this cover trip. So we were just like, oh yeah, we both kind of like, this is made for both of us if you fused us into one person, basically. But I got to play a prologue chapter of the game, which is set, it's like pretty much a prequel to the game, because the game's set in 1980, but the prologue I played was in 1963. If you've watched any of the gameplay trailers that have come out, you do see glimpses of that section where you play as the police officer, and you're investigating the game's primary setting, which is the cider mill steel mill, which is this, like, at least in 1980, is this abandoned steel mill that the four teenagers decide to film their own horror movie in because it has ties to Frank Stone, who was this infamous serial killer that went on some kind of like rampage back in the day in, this town, which is like a small, unassuming, quaint town, but it's also like scarred by this dark history of Frank Stone. So I got to play the 60s sequence when the steel mill is still operational, and you're sort of looking for this missing child, and you're doing some of the like the Supermassive stuff. I would say the thing that stood out to me the most was, and this is something that the creative director Steve Goss was going on about like, when you see Supermassive, you probably already have like a pretty good idea of what to expect from their horror games, and that working with Behavior for the casting of Frank Stone sort of represented an opportunity to break a lot of their own rules, because they wanted to combine the more overt Dead by Daylight mechanics and sort of motifs into this game, where he said it's not the casting of Frank Stone isn't a super massive game and as you know it, but it's also not a Dead by Daylight game. Like, they were describing it as something like its own thing, and it was hard to see that just because in the demo that I played, because it's so early, I didn't get to see a lot of the bigger changes that they told us about, but you could see like the Dead by Daylight flourishes. Are either of you, Kyle, I don't think you are, but Charles, are you a Dead by Daylight guy at all?
I'm not a huge horror person or a huge multiplayer games person. So both of these like developers are in blind spots for me.
Okay.
But for some reason this is the most interesting supermassive game to me for whatever reason. I think because it's like I am interested in the fact that it's connected to a larger universe, if that makes any sense. Like, I like the idea of it existing in a pocket of a larger thing. So I'm interested. Yeah. I'm probably going to play this game, I guess, is my
the idea that they're branching off from something that is like really like more defined than you think if you're outside of the Dead by Daylight world. Like, that was something that I took away from reading your cover story and the big feature that Alex put together as well, of just like learning that the fiction of Dead by Daylight is actually like pretty extensive and detailed and like specific, and like this is like casting Frank Stone is like a great like foot in the door for like to understand what's going on there, and it sounds cool.
Yeah, they mentioned that Dave Richard, who's one of the lead and one of the principal creators of Dead by Daylight on the behavior side, talked about this is something that they've been wanting to do for a long time, because there was a lot of the fan base had been saying they wanted something like this, where he dropped an interesting little factoid where he's like, a lot of like a sizable portion of Dead by Daylight fan base doesn't even play the games. They just like absorbing the lore from like streamers or content creators that play it, because either they're afraid of horror games or more commonly they're just not multiplayer people. You know, it's like, oh, I like the mythos of this world and I like the vibe of it, but I just don't want to play with people. It's just not my thing.
Right. So I'm one of those people. Yeah,
and I'm kind of that too, to an extent. So this was like an opportunity to find a way, like you said, Kyle, to get them in the door a different way, and also present this lore, but from a way that it's not presented in Dead by Daylight. So like in Dead by Daylight is a very, very quick primer for what the lore of Dead by Daylight is, but it's basically revolves around this weird like living like universe / entity thing called what's called the Entity, and it basically just goes around like you can travel through the cosmos, through time and space, which also justifies why there's so many different media properties in Dead by Daylight, because you can just go into different timelines, and it just goes into worlds and like feeds on like powerful emotions, and then it just goes around like just like basically invading worlds and either creating killers by driving them insane, or just finding people that are already evil and then just like plucking them. And then also survivors are found because they wander into these areas that the entity is touched, and they get warped into the entity itself. And so then the entity just...
Nicolas Cage is involved for some reason.
Yeah, he went down the wrong hallway and got sucked into this world.
I believe
and then
it.
I believe
But the entity just puts them in these endless trials of killers trying to hunt down and kill survivors, and survivors trying to flee, because it just generates powerful emotions of like, if you're the killer, you're just like angry and, you know, full of bloodlust, and if you're the survivor, you're terrified and maybe even hopeful because you think you're going to get out, because you only have to turn on one more generator, and like the entity doesn't care who wins. It's like, I get what I want either way, but you're pretty much just trapped in this loop. But because Dead by Daylight takes place inside the entity, the casting of Frank Stone is an opportunity to kind of show from the outside, this is what it looks like when the entity invades a world. In this case, yeah, like this is what it looks like when it's starting to seep into a world and find like, I guess, a killer in Frank Stone, whether or not it creates Frank Stone or Frank Stone was already evil, and then the entity is like, okay, I want some of that. It's unclear, but like, yeah, give me some of that. But yeah, I'm with you guys. Like, that's an interesting premise. Again, for someone that's not a big DVD person, it's like, this is a cool vehicle to sort of like get familiar with the mythos of that series. in terms of like the pure gameplay, all like the skeleton of a supermassive game is the same. Of like you're making these decisions that change the narrative as well as can either lead to a character's death, like a permanent death, or not, which of course steers the story in a variety of different directions. One interesting note about the death, though, was that because, like in a traditional supermassive game, when someone dies, they're just dead. They're out of the story. They're gone. But Dead by Daylight, death isn't really straightforward like that because of the nature of how the entity works. Like if you die in that game, the entity just wipes your memory and then places you back at the start of a trial, and then that's sort of the narrative conceit for why you're doing all these multiplayer games. And the developers tease that will be addressed in some way in this game, which makes me wonder what happens when a character dies in this game. Can they come back? And would they have their memory wiped? Like if your party member just gets off and comes back and is like, I don't even know what's going on here. Like, is that something that sounds like something really weird that they sound like they're going to play around with? But even just like some of the stuff that I saw in my demo was even replacing the sort of like Supermassive style button prompts where, the basic example would be like, oh, you walk to a room and then suddenly a chandelier is going to fall on your head and you got to push X or it's going to crash and kill or injure you. And now a lot of those button prompts have been replaced by the skill checks that Dead by Daylight has. So if you're playing Dead by Daylight, like if you're a survivor, the goal is to like turn on these generators to escape the levels. And it's just this like basically stop the meter kind of mini game where you're just like, it's like this meter spinning, you have to try to stop, and it's really tense because if you mess up, it makes a lot of noise to where the killer in the map can pinpoint where you are. So like that mini game has been replicated exactly into this, and it adds more nuance to sort of like the different outcomes of like a QTE sequence, where if you nail it, you'll get like the best outcome, which is relative, of course. But if you like slip outside of that, then it can lead to like maybe one or two things going wrong. Like there was one point where, without getting too specific, I was squeezing through like a shimmy thing, and like a skill check appeared that I missed, and then it wound up with this character who was carrying a flashlight, like getting his hand cut, breaking the flashlight so I couldn't use it anymore, and then he had this like permanent hand injury for the rest of the demo that affected a fight that came later. Like it was like everything that could have gone wrong went wrong with him. Whereas when I succeeded another playthrough of it, he got to keep the flashlight, which changed the fight dramatically later on. So it's like, okay,
super massive, yeah.
Yeah. There's even little flourishes, like there's like, you hear like Dead by Daylight sound effects. There's collectibles that are Dead by Daylight themed that I can't talk about, but there's even little things like the pallets are in the game. Like if you play Dead by Daylight, there are pallets that you can drop to slow the killers if you're being chased, and like there's a secret part where you have to move a pallet from in front of a door, which is like just a small little nod of like, I see what you did there. So those are some of the little ones, but the bigger, more substantial mechanic is the filmmaking aspect, because the primary game, like I mentioned, is you making a movie with this group of teenagers, and you've got a Super 8 camera, like an 8mm camera that you're using this for. And that's like the central to everything, not even just like the gameplay, but to the story, because it is an active like device that you can use. Like you can pull out the camera at any time during the game and start filming things. And there's times where you're going to have to film. Apparently the camera is magic in some way, because it's just got some arcane energy, but it can also do things like, there's an invisible, the only example they gave, and they were also being very cagey about discussing the camera, by the way, so there's some big things in store for this, but one that they did divulge is like, oh, there's an invisible enemy that you can only see with the camera, so you're gonna have to pull it up and try to pinpoint it down, but it's sort of, and there also might be more than one camera, was another thing they sort of teased, like, oh, but they did say that its capabilities would evolve throughout the adventure too. So it seems like again, supermassive games tend to be pretty like I would say hands off, but like the gameplay is sort of like, it takes a bit of a backseat to like the storytelling and the presentation usually. Like they've gotten, like I said, they've gotten more sort of like engaging with like each of the like the Dark Pictures and Quarry releases. But this one seems to be the most active, where again, Steve Goss, the creative director, talked about they wanted to make it more interactive and make it more systemic because that's what Dead by Daylight is, which is the hard opposite of what their games usually are. But they were like, okay, like how do we make this a little bit more like less guided than our traditional releases? And they talked about like the AI has like non-scripted behavior now, which is completely against what their games have usually been. Among some other sort of flourishes that they didn't want to talk about. But again, it seems cool. Like I only play like ultimately a small slice of the game, but it looked great. Their games always look great, but this is made in Unreal Engine 5 and like the facial expressions.
Is that their first Unreal Engine 5 game? Do you know, or?
I don't know. Was the Quarry Unreal 5?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I wouldn't be surprised if that was the first one, but I don't
Quarry
actually
was
know.
such a weird trajectory because it was going to be like a Stadia exclusive for a while. Then it's like, who knows what they built that game on.
It was, yeah. Remember when we were all going to be Stadia exclusives at some point?
I still have my Stadia controller.
I do too. I was a founder. I was there on day one. I got the founder controller. So yeah, I actually don't know, but I mean, this game looks awesome in Unreal 5.
Quarry was made in Unreal Engine 4, so bam, Unreal Engine 5, their first Unreal Engine 5 game. We can confirm, thanks to Wikipedia. Hopefully Wikipedia's right.
But yeah, like I said, looks great. Seems to play great. I'm excited to see more of the intersections between the two sort of like Dead by Daylight and the traditional supermassive gameplay style. And also, again, the story stuff. I want to see like a narrative single player version of this world. So I'm like you guys, like I'm psyched for this. I want to play some more of it. I liked what I saw of it so far.
Yeah, it seems cool.
Is the title The Casting of Frank Stone? Is that in reference to like casting in a film sense?
That's a good. I never even thought of that because I thought of casting as like iron like works like smithing.
Oh,
because he's got like the metal, like the welder mask that he wears. And like the demo that I played, the prologue, there is a point where you go to like because it's set in a steel mill. So you're in a steel mill. So honestly, I thought of that, but honestly, it might be a double entendre that I did not think of. So
my first thought was spells, and I was like, it can't always be spells. Sometimes other fantasy exists.
I mean, you have a magic camera.
It's true. Yeah, maybe it's all three.
Yeah. Oh man. Good
maybe
call.
It's fishing.
There's a fishing with Frank Stone.
That'll be their like a dating game style spin-off in a couple of years, right? Or the April Fool's game that they do is a Frank Stone fishing game.
Did you guys ever play that? Hooked on You?
No, I never did. No.
I thought about going back to it because we did talk about that game, and honestly, that game has a little bit of significance to this because that was the first time Behavior, who's like understandably very precious about Dead by Daylight, it's their baby, and it's a giant success for them. But like we talked about, like just the process of them giving that up to PsyOp because that team did the KFC dating game before that, and how that was like tough at first, but then easy because it's comedy. Where it's like okay, like it can be silly. You can do whatever you want because it's not canon. But they're like, this is different because it's a more serious thing, Frank Stone, I mean, and that it is canonical. I don't know. There's a whole little like section of the cover story where I talked about just the interesting relationship between Hooked on You and this game in terms of like Behavior's level of comfort with letting someone else take the reins to their biggest franchise. But yeah, the digital issue is out now. You can read it. Physical issues will be out in mailboxes in the coming weeks, and also we've got some online stories coming up as well as videos. By the time you're listening to this, there should be or there is a big feature that I wrote for breaking down the camera mechanic, and then we should have an NGT up, I believe, too, with some exclusive kind of gameplay footage that we got. So yeah, keep an eye out on GameInformer.com as well as our YouTube channel for more Frank Stone stuff over the coming months. But shout out to Behavior and Supermassive. They were very accommodating during our trip. And like I said, excited to see the game in full when it comes September 3rd, which they recently announced the release date for.
Yeah, not too far off. It's like a month or so, yeah.
So, jumping to our next game, Charles, you have been playing a game that I've had my eye on for a long time that I'm excited to hear some impressions of, which is a ranger colon a role puzzling adventure.
Yes, or as I would call it, Ranger colon. I hardly know her. Game fun.
Game fun.
Good. I haven't played that much of it. I've played I haven't like left the starting area. I basically just picked it up before we started recording just so I could talk about it a little bit. If you're unfamiliar with this game, it is imagine like a grid-based Zelda-like game. But the difference is that whenever the main character, Gemma, I think is her name, whenever she moves, the entire line of the grid moves with her. And this is something that I'm realizing now playing the game. This is unique to Gemma. This does not happen when other people do it. And so she's grown up in this town and everyone's like, yeah, I mean, I was doing fine. And then you had to like scoot the whole line of grids over and you knocked my ladder over and you broke the thing I was working on.
Yeah, like don't people like freak out at this godlike ability that she has?
Oh, they don't like it at all.
Which fair, I guess.
But yeah, so it's a really interesting like central mechanic to base the game around, but it's one of those things where it's like very simple base, and then as soon as you feel like you get a grasp on what the mechanic is, they introduce something new to like twist on it, or they introduce like a new thing for a specific area. So one of the things is there are like enemies in this game, but you don't have a like weapon on you. You have to use your like slide puzzle skills to like just. There's a bunch of loose swords on the ground. You got to slide the swords into the enemies, and then they'll like pop and explode, and that'll like clear up new paths for you to go. You can also do that thing, like in I think you can do it in Pac-Man, where you go off on one side of the screen, you come in back on the other side.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
The Mario Brothers 2 system and Pac-Man. Yeah.
And Pac-Man. But yeah, so that's pretty vital a lot of times too, because there'll just be a wall in your way, and it's like, well, I needed to go left, but if I go right, I can also go left, which makes sense when you're looking at the grid. And yeah, I don't know, I haven't played a ton of it, but it's very, very charming, very straightforward, but it has that good, like simple charm to it that makes it very easy to pay attention to and be engaged with, but also not like so simple that I'm like bored out of my mind. It's like just enough riding that line where I can enjoy it.
Does it seem like it can get very complicated? Because that was like my fear, sort of looking at it. I was like, this is kind of a cool idea. I like the way it looks, but I was like, because like those sliding box puzzles, I never enjoy those because they get so complicated. But like, do you think there's potential there? I know you're like a Rubik's Cube guy as well, like, right? You're good at those kind of puzzles, right?
Yeah, I saw that video that Min-Max put out.
I have it.
Was
I have
blown away, by the way. I did not know you had
I'm going to
that.
be looking away for the next 90 seconds, and it's because I'm doing a Rubik's Cube while we're talking.
Yeah. Also,
wow.
Congrats on winning Janet Garcia's apartment through a Rubik's Cube contest. Is that what was happening in that video?
I don't know what the... this is for context. This is a Min-Max
Nope, no
thing.
context. We don't need context.
No context. Never mind. I own Janet's apartment now, but I'm letting her and her fiance stay there.
Yeah, you arranged them out of there.
Yeah, they don't have to find other arrangements. Boom, brought it back. What the heck were we talking about?
I was just asking if there's a danger of it getting too complicated.
Yes, I don't think so. But I'm very
town?
early still. So it's a thing of like I could see it getting difficult, but it seems to be doing the thing where instead of like right when it gets to the point where it's like, wow, I had to think really hard about that puzzle, then the like section of that game ends, and then all of a sudden I'm doing something else and I have to worry about some new thing. So at first it was like, how do I get these swords to the monsters? And then once that was kind of difficult, it became, okay, now how do I hold these switches down to go through the doors? And it's one of those switches where like the thing has to stay on there, so you can't just put a piece down and then slide to the right away from it, because then you'll pull it off. And so you have to like manage that. And then as soon as that's a thing, they introduce some new concept. So it's not a like complicated in terms of like one kind of really hard puzzle.
It's not like you're constantly doing sliding picture puzzles. So that's not what.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah, and the whole it's pretty. I never got to a point where I felt like I was like stuck in one spot. Like you have a pretty free range of movement for the most part. So yeah, it doesn't feel very restrictive.
Cool. Is there combat?
Yeah, the combat is basically what I was saying of you just pull swords into certain enemies. I've yet to find enemies that move. So they're usually just staying still, but you just gotta orient it the right way. Rubik's Cube, done.
That happened off screen, so he could have just swapped Rubik's Cube.
Yeah, that's true. He could have did like the cooking thing where he's like, hey, "This is what it looks like when it's done."
Yeah.
But yeah, no. I have also not been in a scenario so far yet where like time has been an issue. Like there's no pressure for me to like move out of the way in time to dodge things or do anything like that. It's mostly like you can look, you can assess for as long as you want, and yeah.
Cool. So positive first impression, right?
Yes. I intend to keep playing it. It's not supposed to be very long. I think they said 4 to 5 hours. And it comes out on Thursday, which is the day this comes out, July 25th. Typically, post on Thursdays, right? Yeah.
Sometimes I push it early if things are going well.
I think it's also, if I can double check, it's also coming to Netflix games. So if you have Netflix and a phone, Arranger.
Yeah, there we go. Have you guys used Netflix? Are you guys Netflix subscribers? I canceled mine, so I haven't had a chance to.
Kyle and I both played Point P.
Point P is very good.
Which is a thing we've talked about. That's the extent of mine, though.
Yeah, it is. There's a lot of good games for it, though. Like both Oxenfrees are on it, and I think Point P is very good.
Hades is there.
Dead Cells is there.
Yeah. Oh, Dead Cells. Yeah, and then the strategy game that people love.
Into the Breach.
Yeah, there's good stuff on there. It's worth looking at. I mean, it's probably one of those things. Like if maybe you have a Netflix subscription, it's part of it, and that's great. But like, you'd probably still want to invest in like a backbone controller or something. Mm-hmm. But sure. Yeah, it's like one of those things. It's like you have like if you're paying for Netflix, like you actually have a pretty good video game library on your phone that you might not be aware of, which is cool.
Netflix games is so interesting to me because I feel like so much of our time covering the games industry, we'll see a developer or game company or whatever, and they'll clearly put a lot of work into making a game and advertising it and just going really hard of like, this is our game, we worked really, really hard on it, here it is. And then despite all of that, the studio will like close or the game won't sell very well or whatever. Netflix games is like the opposite thing, where every time I talk to someone, they have no idea it exists, and it's like it's a good product, but it's like not communicated very well. And despite that, it's been years; it's still around. They're like expanding and stuff. So I'm curious of like how, at what point they flesh out their marketing, if they do at all, or what that even looks like. I think
a lot of people don't even know how to access their library. They're like, so is it like do I go into Netflix and the games are there, or do I have to download the game separately and log into Netflix? Like, how do you, it's not like, it's not as clear as like Game Pass. We're like, okay, that's an app that it's just got everything there. You know what I mean? It's like, how do I actually use this? I don't know. Netflix games, everybody. But okay, yeah, I'm excited to play Arranger. I want to get my hands on that. So yeah, excited to see what you think of it as you continue moving people around against their will, Charles.
Me too.
How could you?
Speaking of losing things against your will, I have finished. I played and finished. Nobody Wants to Die. Have you guys seen this game at all?
No.
I had a couple trailers sent to me by them, and I remember even looking at them and thinking like, this looks cool, even if I'm not exactly sure what this is, you know?
Okay, this dropped last week. I think it was the 17th. It is a first-person like detective mystery adventure game set in maybe the coolest depiction of a cyberpunk city I've ever seen, because you know when you think of cyberpunk, like they all kind of blend together, like it's all just variations of Blade Runner, but I think this changes that up because it's a mix of that aesthetic with like 19 like 40s, 50s Art Deco. So like imagine if like maybe like BioShock, like Rapture, like what if that was like a cyberpunk city, but it still had all the Art Deco stuff, where it's like flying cars, but all the cars look old, and like all of your cool gadgets have just like this vintage quality to them, even though they're like infinitely more advanced than anything we have.
Yeah.
It's like such a weird mishmash, but it gives the game so much like personality combined with like the kind of like jazzy noir soundtrack it has. Again, you see cyberpunk games all the time, but it's like, this is one that I was like, this is gonna stick with me because it has like that Art Deco really separates it from the pack.
It looks cool. Like, pull up a trailer. Like, it looks.
Yeah,
great.
I pulled it up just now to look at it, and I was like, oh yeah, this is not. I don't know what I expected this to look like. I think I was thinking of that game, Nobody Saves the World.
Oh,
that's
just because they had similar titles, so I was picturing some like 2D indie thing, and I was like, "Oh no, this is like a
it looks
3D.
It looks AAA, you know, to lend it a compliment.
And it does, because I played it on PC. I believe it's also on PlayStation 5 and Series X. But it not only does it like the art direction strong, but just like fidelity wise, it is a sharp looking game. Like the lighting is great. Like I don't. The studio, the name escapes me, but I was like,
Playon? Oh, Critical Hit is the developer.
Critical Hit, yeah. Playon's the publisher. They're a Polish studio, I believe. But I was like, what else have they done? It's like, this looks like a lot of money went into this.
Yeah.
But also, it's not a long game, which maybe helps. Like, you can finish it in like 5 hours, roughly. But the idea of the game is that it's set in like the 23 something, like the year 23 something, and you're playing as this detective named Jack Cara, and the way the world works, and this is maybe the most terrifying and like upsetting world I've been in a while, where basically humanity has solved like death. Like they found a way to.
Sounds great. Sounds like nothing could go wrong with that.
And the way that they've done this is that they've created a means to extract your consciousness and put it into another body. So people don't really die in this world anymore. Like, death is very, very rare. And the way the system works is that the government has legal ownership over your body, to where when you come of age, which is like
And this takes place in the future, Marcus?
There might be some commentary about certain things going on in our current society when it comes to ownership of your body. But like the way this world works is that the government has legal control over your body once you come of age, which is 21 years old, at which point you have to start paying a subscription to keep your body. Like, you have to start paying to keep it, because otherwise, if you do not do that, they can seize you, extract your consciousness, put it into this massive bank of other consciousnesses, and then your body just goes up for sale, basically. Like, other people that want to change bodies can look at you and be like, oh yeah, that's the one that's got everything I want, I'll take theirs. And then it's like, you basically become like a used car. So like there's this giant, so there's like a whole economy and like culture around this, where like the hyper rich will just like, because they can afford the best bodies, so to speak, like all bodies are graded. We're like, oh, this is an A+ body, and then it'll also list like, here's all the unique traits of this body, good or bad, of like your character Jack. He's been alive for like 300 years, and he's like in his 4th body, and you can see like his little profile was like, oh, the body he has like a allergies, and they'll list that like, oh yeah, you're lactose intolerant, by the way, and you got a peanut allergy, just so you know, or you got a tattoo that might be problematic, I don't know if you want to get that taken care of, or just something. But that sort of like determines the grade of the body. And then also there's this idea that every time you switch to a new body, there's debate about how much of your consciousness transfers over, and whether or not it might potentially degrade with each transfer of like, are you and that plays into Jack, where he has this like, he lost his wife in like a traumatic accident. You don't know what happened, but you're kind of figuring that out. But he keeps seeing her, and he has like sync issues because that's like a thing where like, oh, when you transfer to a new body, sometimes you have like this mental issue where you just sort of start to break down and maybe start seeing things that may or may not be real, and you have to take this special medication called ambrosia to sort of like fix those symptoms. So he's like constantly chugging these things as he's like wigging out, and you see like the substance that sort of like contains your consciousness is called Icarite, and you just see it like branching. It's like this glowing web of like energy that's like flowing all over the environment, and he's like struggling to get a hold of himself. But his sort of like goal is that there's this the creator of this system, or one of the creators, is murdered, and like really murdered, because the only thing that keeps you alive is the Icarite that everyone has in their brain with your consciousness, and if you can completely fry that, then you're just like dead basically. And someone has managed to do this, and you're trying to figure out like how, like, was it an accident, or did he kill himself, or did someone else do it, and for what purpose? So like the game is basically the shorthand I've decided for is like it's Batman Arkham Detective Mode, the video game, where you've got all like 4 different tools that you're going into these investigative spaces, or these crime scenes, and you're just trying to piece together clues. And you've got like his main device is this gauntlet where he can basically scan the environment and then sort of like reconstruct it and then replay it. Like you can scrub through it where you can kind of see, it sort of like reanimates everything basically. So it's like, oh, this thing exploded. I can just rewind to before it exploded and kind of figure out what caused the explosion or something like that.
Which, coincidentally, like this Cyberpunk 2077, the game like had sequences like that as well. And then, that's like a Blade Runner thing too, like him looking into photos. So it's like, it's of the genre, right? But but well done here, it seems.
Yeah, it looked like it's super slick. Just like the animation, the interface for it, like it looks cool as you're sort of like basically reverse engineering a crime scene where you're walking in, you're like, he's questioning like, I don't know how this guy could have landed here, or how could he get shot from this angle? And then you start to gradually put the pieces together. Like you've got a UV lamp that you can use to find like hidden substances or bloodstains that you can trace to a source. You've got an X-ray that you can use to scan through walls to find like hidden wires that lead to generators. And then he's also got a like just the regular version of detective vision where you just flip it on and you can see sort of like the objects that you can interact with. Because this is one of those games where like you poking around is like important, where you'll find little clues that, whether it's like a little book or a cup or something, but it might have something important. And it does matter in terms of the case, as far as I can tell. Like you'll pick up things where it's like, oh, you affected the outcome of this story of your case, because it's like a choice-driven game too, where there's very few like characters that you're interacting with. Like the main one is this woman in your ear named Sarah, who's like your partner, and you guys kind of have like an uneasy relationship because she's, you've got a record of being like a hothead, basically. Like you're sort of like the loose cannon kind of cop guy, where the chief is not really a fan of you, basically. And she's like the new rookie on the scene who also has only lived in her original body, where she's like, I think they call her a newborn. We're like, oh, you've been alive less than 50 years? That's weird. Like you haven't switched bodies yet. So you're kind of having like your relationship with her can change based on interaction, like how trustworthy you are of each other, whether or not she'll go behind your back with things. And some of the optional conversations are pretty fun. Like I think the performances by and large are pretty good, especially Sarah. I think the main guy is like James. He kind of comes off as like very hard-boiled, like noir novel style. Like he's kind of doing the like long monologues where he's making a lot of like metaphors that make limited sense, and then like he's like, oh, the rain is coming down like a cold sweat of fire, and it reminds me of the heart of the city. And he's like going like that kind of stuff, which is funny because his character is a fan of old crime movies from like the 1950s, and there's like points where he actively makes fun of that kind of character, but then he's only like barely a step above them in terms of like how like there's several of his lines where I'm like, I don't know about that one. I don't know if that would made a lot of sense, but it's good. But he's saying it with like 100% just like seriousness behind it. But like I think the dynamic between him and Sarah is like really fun. There's some really cool revelations with both of them that I won't get into. But like even the optional stuff can like sort of like steer the story in different ways. Like there's one point where you go into like the rich guy's house and you find like he has chocolate in a jar, like which has gone extinct basically because there's like barely anything is like organic in this world. Like there's barely a trace of green just because of how, you know, this is like late stage capitalism where like they're just building upon buildings and like food is barely real. But you find like a piece of like real chocolate that has been preserved for like over 100 years. And you have this optional conversation where she gets really excited when you find it. And she's like, can you smell it for me and describe what it smells like to you? Like she really wants to know. And you can like end this right away where you're just like, no, I'm not doing that. But then if you go through it, you're going through like this semi-lengthy sequence of just like, I don't know, it smells like mushrooms maybe. And she's like, really? Can you describe it a different way or like an emotion? And you can just keep going
metaphor.
Yeah,
I really like imagining the conversation reaction of like, oh yeah, what does that smell like? And you're like, I'm not telling you that. Just like shutting someone down, like, stop being weird, man. We'll just talk
you
about
can if you want to. Like, you know,
yeah, I think that's so funny.
Is this like an action game? Is there like, are you shooting and running or is it all like just detective work? Okay, that's cool.
Yeah, I mean, you're moving around these spaces. Like, you're freely moving around in first person. You're picking things up, inspecting them. But there's no combat. Even though it teases combat a few times, like, there's sequences where he pulls his gun. But you're never, like, pulling the trigger. It's sort of like something will always happen. Or, like, usually just something always happens. But I was, like, waiting for it a few times. They make it a point to establish, like, he's got a gun. Like, you can look at it and stuff and inspect it. So you're like, I'm going to shoot someone at some point. But no, not really. You're just going around just crime scene to crime scene, just doing these rather lengthy like reconstructions of these scenes. Like one scene can take like probably like a good 15 minutes at least, depending on how long it takes you to sort of connect dots. And then even after that, you're going back to your apartment and you've got like a sort of like a flow chart that you're putting together with all your clues to try to figure out like, okay, how do these things connect? What are the conclusions I'm drawing? And I think that changes based on what you find too, or at least what you sort of like decide, like this, what significance you assign to clues in the moment might change it. But that like little exercise of connecting dots is presented in a really slick and cool way. I think the story itself is generally pretty good. Like, I think it's really gripping, just the world. Like I said, like there were multiple points playing this game where I was just like, almost like genuinely upset of like, how could we let this happen? Like, this is an awful way to live. And a lot of the story is sort of like the main villain is sort of a guy that's like seemingly going against that status quo in a maybe very destructive way. But you have choices to where like, you know, he's in like, you know, you could just kill this guy because, you know, he's like a horrible person, like this politician or this like celebrity, or is like, you know, all the stuff he's done, and you kill him now, you know, you'll be saving a lot of lives, you know, and, you know, but then you kind of do the thing of like, yeah, but this isn't the right way, or, you know, that kind of thing. But there's some pretty messed up people in this world.
I mean, is it satisfying? You finished it, right?
Yeah, I think by and large it is.
No spoilers, obviously.
The stuff with the villain, I walked away not totally clear on who he was exactly, and I don't know if that's a consequence of the choices that I made. Like maybe I didn't unlock a dialogue tree, because you can see like when you get some conversations there, you'll see responses that are locked, and you don't know what they are, but you can see there's a lock of like, okay, I didn't find something that would have unlocked this. And then there were times where I found a thing and it's like, oh, this is available now. Okay. So that's why I say like, it's important to poke around and see how much you can find before moving on or talking to someone. But I think the storytelling, like for the most part, is like genuinely gripping. And I was like, invested in everything that was happening, and like I said, between the presentation and the world and just the and the investigative stuff, can get a little repetitive. Like you are kind of doing the same 4 general things for linking sequences, but like it's presented in such a cool way that I never really minded. And again, I was like, I want to see what I would like to see the answer to this. I'm very curious to see how this unfolded, so I'm fine with scanning this thing again. So yeah, it's cool. It's a cool game, and
cool.
It feels like something that kind of came out of nowhere. But yeah, I'm still mulling on it. I'm thinking about just starting another playthrough just to make some different choices, see how differently things can unfold. But it seemed like there's a lot of potential for things to go in completely different directions, because there's some pretty big decisions that you have to make.
Cool. Yeah, no, it does. It feels like kind of left field. I think it came out July 17th, it looks like, on Steam. So yeah.
It's one of the games where I feel like I could talk about the world forever. It's just the lore. Like everything is about the way the body subscriptions work. They like promote keeping your body healthy in a way that is like almost like gross. Of like, if they're very much like, please don't smoke and drink, and not because we want you to like feel better. It's because odds are your body's going to be loaned to someone else, so don't give them like a faulty body, please. Like there's like these really
think of the resale
posters
value
everywhere.
Yeah, right.
Like literally it's that of like you see posters being like, hey, drinking is bad, and doing drugs is bad and elite. We'll arrest you because you're destroying the government property, your body. It's wild. It's a wild game. So but yeah, that is Nobody Saves. God, Charles, you got me once.
Sorry.
Nobody Wants to Die. Out now, PlayStation, Xbox, and PC. Kyle, you wrapped up Kunitsu-Gami Path of the Goddess recently. You gave it a review score.
Yeah.
Tell us all about that journey.
Yeah, I wanted to follow up on it quickly because we talked about it a good bit last week. At the time, Wes was actually the assigned reviewer, which I mentioned just to explain like why I had my name on the score. Wes ended up going on a surprise work trip, and that took him away from his console. But I also bring it up because kind of like earlier this year, Lorelei and the Laser Eyes, it was a game that I just kind of started because I was like, this looks cool, I'll check this out. Like, we check out so many games. Like, we are constantly just starting games. So it really is something special when it's like, oh, I'm finishing this. Like, there's no way I don't finish this.
Yeah.
And that's
Nobody Wants to Die was that for me. I was like, oh, I've seen this. And then you're like, oh, I think I'm going to finish this.
Yeah, and that's Kunitsu-Gami was that for me. And it really surprised me for a lot of reasons because, like, I'm not really a big strategy guy. I don't really enjoy the act of, like, in that game, you sort of assign roles to people and then you place them on the battlefield, kind of, so to speak. And, like, that's just not the... I don't enjoy that kind of gameplay, but it just really worked for me here just because of it's never overly complicated. It's satisfying to kind of level up those villagers and stuff like that. And then when you can always run in and fight yourself, and like you can always kind of save the day ultimately. Like I certainly played levels that I had to restart and stuff like that. Like I wasn't like a breeze. I did make it through without replaying any levels, though, which I was very happy about in a weird way. I was like, please don't make me like replay levels I've already beaten. I don't want to do that. But I gave it an 8.75, and it's like it is one of the year's surprises for me. Not that like I don't have faith in like Capcom or anything like that. Like the first time I saw it, I never thought it looked bad or anything, but it was just one of those like, I don't know what this is. It's got a cool art style. We'll see if it's like destined to be a cult classic. And it was just one of those that I was like, this is great. I don't want to stop playing. I'm going to see this to the end. And I really liked Kunitsu-Gami. Like I bet, I don't know what the rest of the year will look like, obviously, but I bet it'll be on my top 10 at the end of the year. Like it really surprised me in a way that I wasn't expecting and really ultimately enjoyed.
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to go back to it since we talked about it last week, but it's one of those games where, like I said it last week, like it feels like this year's Exoprimal of like the weird thing we weren't sure about that came out and was better than people thought it would be.
Yeah, pretty cool. Yeah, I mean, Exoprimal never clicked with me outside of playing like one or two matches. When I was like, I kind of get this and it's kind of charming, but I don't really feel super compelled to go back to it. But the loop is just really satisfying of like save the woman, get to the end of the level, and then go back. Before the next fight, you can upgrade a lot of villages. You can fix villages, which lets you level up yourself or your villagers, and then you can go do some more fighting. And then it's very good at that one more thing. Let me just take care of this before I go to bed. And it's like a game that kept me up late. And also, in a way that I like, it's not very narrative heavy. There's no dialogue, so it was a game that I enjoyed, like putting on a podcast and just doing some combat and strategy and just playing through that loop over and over is a very satisfying game.
Do you think between this and Exoprimal, like those feel like games where if they all came out maybe the same year, I guess they did not really the same year. They all came out close together, like a year apart, but like they almost feel like a new Capcom 6. Like you remember the Capcom 6 from back in the day of like
yes, yeah.
Can you tell me what this is?
So that was an initiative from like the mid 2000s that they just announced like 6.
It wasn't 6 though. I think that number is too.
I think
big,
it wound
right?
up. I think it wound up being 5, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it was like a bunch of games they announced that were all coming out at relatively the same time, or like they were all in development, but they were all like
5.
I guess
the Capcom 5.
The Capcom 5. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of the Wyatt 6, maybe. I don't know. It's
Yeah.
a wrestling thing. But like, yeah. But it was like, hey, we got these 5 weird games that we're working on, and they're all coming out in relatively the same time.
Yeah, and they're all GameCube games. Like Capcom was like,
Yeah.
we're doing GameCube. And
Because it was Beautiful Joe.
Yep.
It was God Hand.
No,
It
that
was
was
God Hand
later.
on?
Yeah, God Hand was
that-
later.
Was it really?
Yeah.
Oh, man,
So
okay.
because I have the like there's a whole
Okay.
Wikipedia page for it. It's PNO3, which was
Right.
which was pretty mediocre. It was Beautiful Joe, which was good. Killer 7, which is like a cult classic,
Right.
and then Resident Evil 4 was in that bundle because it was really surprising that Capcom was so focused on GameCube, and they're like, we're making 4 GameCube exclusive games, or 5. The 5th one ended up getting canceled, which was like a dragon game, I think. Dead Phoenix is what it was called, and it ended up getting canceled. But Marcus, you are totally right. This feels like a Capcom 5 thing, where they're like, yeah, we have our big franchises and stuff. We have our Street Fighters and that kind of thing. But like, we're going to try some experiments here and see what clicks. And that was like Exoprimal and Kunitsu-Gami feel like they totally fit that mold of like, we're going to try something special. And I mean, Exoprimal, I mean, I feel like, though it was like generally critically well received, I feel like it kind of disappeared pretty quickly. But
it's not a game that it's built for longevity because it is very
Yeah.
much a single player game disguised as a multiplayer game. Because once you get to the end of the story, it's like, oh, okay, you have to play a lot to get to the end of the story. So you're like, I'm
Right.
done. I mean, it's a fun, like it plays well, but
yeah,
like when I got credits, I was like, yeah, I'm good.
yeah, and I mean, Kunitsu-Gami is not like one that I'm like really eager to go back to after seeing credits. So there is New Game Plus if you want to do that, but it just I feel like it's sneaking up on a lot of people. Maybe I'm alone in that, but it really
It's on Game Pass too, which helps.
okay, yeah. So and if you like action, with a little bit of strategy in there, like I feel like Pikmin is maybe the closest game you can relate to. It's different, but it's like you're in control of a group and you're kind of like using them to do stuff. It's just got like the same emotions, that I have when I'm playing Pikmin. So yeah, Kunitsu-Gami, like one of my favorites of the year, and I did not expect that.
Do you guys think Pragmata will be like part of this ilk?
Oh.
Like their next weird thing? Like, do you think this will be part of the new Capcom 5 or whatever number we're going to assign to this?
Do we know like what kind of game that is?
I think they said it's an action game.
I think we've seen gameplay, right? It's like a third-person action game, right?
I don't know if we've... Well, I think that first trailer had... I think that was
And
gameplay.
just to
Or
be
it was
clear, this is-
in-engine cinematics, maybe.
Okay.
This is the game that like they did the weird fake out trailer where they were like, "Here's the release date. Actually, it's delayed."
Yeah, there was a delay trailer.
Indefinite, yeah.
There was from a year ago. There is an official gameplay teaser, and I'm like watching it now, and it kind of almost looks like third-person shootery, kind of almost like Vanquish a little bit, kind of.
Yeah, for those that don't know, by the way, this is the like Kojima-looking astronaut game with the little girl that has powers,
Yeah.
apparently.
It looks cool.
Yeah, like it looks like the Kojima Productions logo is the main character.
But yeah, Marcus, you're totally right, because it's like Capcom. I know we just included Resident Evil 4 in the Capcom 5, but that was kind of an outlier because that was an established franchise. It was just
you got to have a
weird.
headliner in there.
Yeah,
right?
because it was weird because it was a GameCube exclusive. But that being said, I feel like Capcom now is like, look, we got Monster Hunter going strong. We got Resident Evil every year. Street Fighter. Those games are bringing in the money. And then we're also doing these experiments. Pragmata, Exoprimal, Kunitsu-Gami. Like that totally fits them. But just like there's a little team to the side that's like, can we try something here for a little while? And Capcom's like, yeah, we'll bring you back to Resident Evil next year. Why don't you work on Kunitsu-Gami for a little while?
Right. Still waiting for Deep Down, the next game, part of the Capcom 4 or 5. If only Deep Down had been announced in this era of Capcom, it probably would have came out.
Yeah. Charles, you said you did start Kunitsu-Gami at least, or?
Yeah, I did like the first battle. I think I'll go back to it. It was just last night. It was like literally the first time I had turned on my PS5 since I moved. So
dude, moving is easy. Like... That takes what, 3 hours tops?
Yeah. Don't you play video games while you're moving?
Yeah.
I mean, I have. That's what the Switch is for. It's for playing video games while moving.
Right. It's my favorite Switch commercial when they're like in the moving truck just playing the Switches.
They totally
not getting anything done.
Like the opening of Pokemon Emerald.
Where
the kid's just riding in the back of the truck, just like some kids in the back of a U-Haul, like playing Mario Kart and like bumping each other.
Oh, that's going to be in the Switch 2 commercial.
I really hope so. It moves where you move. Switch 2.
That's pretty good, actually. Giving away $1 million ideas here.
My brother does a really good impression of Nintendo Direct voiceover guy of like Yoshi's back with a new adventure.
Right. Yeah.
And I really enjoyed it. Or when it's like he's got a very bright voice, but then he'll drop it down to be like a mysterious world of Pragmata.
Yeah.
Like, just to be like a little more serious because he can't be too happy about it. Anyway,
this one's got browns and blacks in it.
Grand Theft Auto 6 is coming to Switch.
Yes, yeah. Become the king of a criminal underworld. Game's good. I don't know. I haven't played that much of it, but I do. I like. In the same vein of what you guys were talking about, I recently got, when we moved into this house, one of the things we found is my girlfriend's dad's old box of consoles. So I now own, like they had no idea it was still there. I now own a Super Nintendo, a Nintendo 64, and then a PlayStation 1 and 2.
Hell yeah.
So now all of a sudden,
those are relics for you.
Yeah.
And they also like didn't play them very often. There's a like green translucent PS2 controller still in the packaging. And that's like my favorite. Like I modded my Switch Pro controller to be translucent green. Like it's literally like the perfect thing I would want.
It's like a Kit Fisto controller.
It's a kid. It's exactly Kit Fisto.
Question: the N64 controller. If you kind of just like shake it a little bit, does the control stick like loosely kind of shake in there? That's like the trick. For N64 controllers, it's like, oh, Charles is actually he's going to get it. I wasn't. I thought maybe he was.
Is that a good thing?
I've never.
No. You do.
What is this?
If it stands like stiff and doesn't like shake loosely in the controller, like you're in good shape. Like those are hard to come by. So like hold it flat, Charles, and then kind of like, how does it feel? Does it feel stiff in there? That's good. That's good.
It's got a little give, but yeah.
That's good because what the problem was, N64 uses like plastic pieces for the control stick that wear down really easily over time. Like follow-up controllers, they figured out how to do it better, and they would use metal and aluminum and stuff like that. But those N64 ones use plastic, so like. If you can see an overused N64 controller, you can spot one very easily because the control stick is just like flailing around in there. So that would look pretty solid, actually.
Yeah, it's nice because it's very much a thing where he bought it for GoldenEye and didn't use it for much else. So it's all very lightly used stuff. Cool. Anyways, the only reason I brought all this up to tie back to Kunitsu-Gami is now I can go to... I always like to go to like retro game stores just to see what they have, but now I can actually be like, oh, maybe I can buy these things and play them. They're for more than just looking at.
You can get Otagi for your PS2 and be like, this is basically Kunitsu-Gami.
You can get the Capcom 5.
It feels like the stuff. I did the haul I got recently.
Let's see what he got. Oh, Final Fantasy X.
Good start.
Smart.
And then I was like, well, it was only $8, so I got Final Fantasy
X. Hey, 10-2 is a good game.
Like, might as well. And then I never played God of War, the first one.
Oh, nice.
God of War.
Yeah, those are great.
So,
Revisiting the original God of War, because you've played the recent two, right?
Oh yeah, I'm prepared to be like, oh, Kratos, you're really right to be embarrassed about your past.
Yeah, like it would be fun to go back with that context of like knowing where he ends up and seeing where he comes from. Like those, the trajectory of that story is really well done as a result.
Yeah, playing those games now is like looking at Kratos' high school Facebook messages and being like, "Oh, you are a very different person."
Yeah, absolutely.
I think we've talked about God of War before, Kyle. Like way back, I think when we first started, because you reviewed Ragnarok as like the first thing you did when you came here. And I was talking about how like I never played the old God of War games, so my perspective in the games is like Atreus's perspective. Like I know as much about this world as he does. And so it'll be fun to basically be Atreus and be like, "Dad, you did what?"
I bet the gameplay holds
today.
Up too. Yeah, like I'm calling a shot here that could, like, if you go back to GoldenEye, you're gonna have a hard time, Charles. But I think God of War would still be fun today.
Did you play the DLC for Ragnarok, the roguelike thing?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah,
because there's that glimpse of old Kratos in there.
Yeah, you go to Greece, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, so I was like, it felt like that would be your first, like, glimpse into, like, because, you know, it's him literally coming face to face with his old self being like, oh, boy. Yeah, like, oh, that was me, huh?
You are not dressed for the snow.
I was like, God of War 3, still one of my favorite action games of all time. I think God of War 3 is a masterpiece.
Yeah,
so
great.
Yeah, you know what else is great? Real quickly, I'll touch on this because I forgot to do it last week, is Diablo IV, Vessel of Hatred's new Spiritborn class. I got to go to the Blizzard campus, which was my first time ever visiting it. I know it's one of the, it's up there, I feel like, for like game studios you want to visit. I feel like Blizzard is usually up there. And I'm not even like a big Blizzard guy. Like I didn't grow up with Blizzard because I wasn't a PC gamer, which I feel like those two are basically the same things to an extent because so many of their big franchises were PC games. I'm just Diablo and Overwatch 1. That is kind of where my Blizzard, like, I guess, fandom, if you want to call it that, begins and ends. But even then, it was still cool visiting that campus and getting the full tour and seeing the Warcraft, I guess, statue that's in the front that everybody's seen a million times.
Yeah, they got a lot of cool statues, yeah. They
have their own Starbucks that makes them custom Blizzard drinks. Like they have drinks themed after their own They have a Diablo drink that someone recommended I get. I wasn't able to go there and try it, but they're like, yeah, we have our own secret menu where you can get like a Warcraft latte or Diablo frappe or something. And I was like,
weird. That's cool.
Like, how good do you have to be doing to have like this Richie Rich setup, basically, where he had if you're Richie Rich when he had his own McDonald's, you know. I was like,
we all know the reference, Marcus. We've all. I'm
Richie
sure
Rich, Charles.
I'm guessing Charles has not seen Macaulay Culkin.
All on the same page here. I've heard the name. I could infer from there. He's got rich twice. He's a rich guy, owns his own McDonald's. That tracks.
As a kid, I thought having his own McDonald's was like legitimately the coolest thing a rich person could do. For a period
that
of time.
movie's probably led to a lot of, commercialism issues, and like it's like the Back to the Future. The ultimate win at the end of that movie is McFly has a truck. He's like, I won life. I have a truck now. That and like Richie Rich are why we have so many problems today with capitalism.
This is why we're going to be selling our bodies and paying subscription fees. Yeah. But I got to play about over 2 hours actually of the Spiritborn class, which is the new class coming to Vessel of Hatred, and basically it is this cool like martial arts like spirit master where it's native to the new region that the expansion's introducing called Nahatu. It's like a jungle region. The class itself thematically and aesthetically very much inspired by like Central South American kind of like culture, or like you could see a bit of like Mayan or like Incan in some of the character design. Whereas like the combat wise, it is a very offensive focused class, which is what I love about it, because it's literally just a guy that goes in there and just does a bunch of cool martial arts moves and doesn't worry about blocking. It just dodges all over the place. Like it's a very agile class. You're just like back flipping all over the battlefield, and then you're just like cutting down a demon with like a cool like 100-hand slap, or like because it uses like pole arms and glaives as like its sort of preferred weapons. You're just like spinning a glaive and just like slicing a dude up, and you're just like, yep, that's how I like to play my action games. I like a fast-paced dude that just does a gazillion things very quickly. But then on top of that, they can commune with the spirit realm and summons these 4 spirit guardians that it harnesses power for. So and each guardian, which are a jaguar, a centipede, a gorilla, and an eagle, like they each more or less feel like mini classes in themselves because they each kind of promote a different play style. Where like the jaguar is like a fire base and it's just about like relentless offense, and the gorilla is the opposite, where it's about like defense and just like, you know, you can absorb a bunch of punishment and then retaliate with these really heavy blows. The eagle is more maneuverability, where you can just do these attacks where you're just like warping all over the battlefield and doing like almost like Final Fantasy kind of like Lancer jumping, and then it's like electricity based, and then the centipede is like poison and debuffing opponents and just like disrupting mobs. And they each have their own abilities tied to them, and you can mix and match your build to be either a hybrid of different styles, or you can just go pure, like I'm just gonna be pure jaguar and have all that stuff. So it's like a really fun class just in terms of like the amount of customization you can do with it, and how you can just change your approach to battle. But also it's just a fun class to look at, because like when you're just like each of the animals has like an ultimate attack where like the ghost animal just like shows up and then just like attacks a bunch of people. Like you'll see the eagle just like swoop down from above and like slam into like 10 guys and take them out, or like the centipede will emerge from the ground and then just like spraying poison all over the place, and it just looks awesome.
I'm not a big Diablo guy. I mean, this is totally unique, right? Like I know there's like necromancer classes where you can like call the dead to help you, right? But this is
necromancer is more about like necromancer is more about like summoning your own mobs to fight other mobs. But this is like the animals only show up for like the ultimate attack. Otherwise, you're doing abilities where you're sort of like channeling them. Or like,
right?
I'm using an eagle ability that lets me throw feathers at people. You know what I mean? Like they're not like manifesting entirely until you do their ultimate. But it is a completely unique class. Like they said, like, you know, it's the first class that isn't based on like a traditional fantasy archetype, like a mage or like a rogue, you know? So let them sort of like get more creative and also base it, since it was always planned for the expansion. Like they started developing it before the base game came out. They were like, you know, we can tie the gameplay style and the fiction to a location, whereas the other classes are a little bit more, like, you know, they can kind of fit in anywhere. You know what I mean?
But they have to, right? Like if you want to give players a choice of like 5 different classes from the start, they kind of all have to fit in some way.
Right. And you can also, what's cool is that if you play Vessel of Hatred, you can play the entire base game as the Spiritborn from the start. Like you don't have to just wait for the expansion storyline to play it. So if you just want another reason to replay the game or the base game with a new class, you can just like, I'm just gonna go Spiritborn and go fight Lilith. That'll be cool. But yeah, I liked it. I think it's probably my favorite class in the game now.
Oh, cool.
Just because it sings to how I like to play my action games a lot. And I just like the idea of customizing for spirit animals, and also it reminds me of Legends of the Hidden Temple vaguely, because you got a red jaguar and a silver monkey technically. And I asked them that question. It's probably the dumbest question I asked them during my interview, and you would not believe that they said that was not a direct inspiration.
Well, that's a mistake, frankly. I mean, if we're being honest here, come on.
I said you can lie and say it is now, because I'm sure other people will ask. you don't have to
get ready to ask this question and answer this question all day for every journalist.
You don't have to only disappoint me with this answer.
I love the move as a journalist of being like, you can lie if you want. Oh, you said no? Just go ahead and lie. Just actually, I think it would be
I know you got other interviews later. You can lie to them if you want.
Yeah, just lie to them. I'll have the exclusive, the one truthful interview. You can lie to everyone else.
That's funny.
So yeah, Diablo IV Vessel of Hatred launching October 8th, I want to say.
And you included, I mean, Diablo players will probably like, new class, and then I'll play this campaign that's like off to the side, kind of, right? It's like, it's not like they expect players to start the game over with a new class, right? Necessarily.
I mean, you can if you want to,
right?
You know,
okay.
I don't believe you need to beat the base campaign to play the expansion. I think it's just sort of like off to the side. Like,
Yeah,
you
that's
just
cool.
go
That's
to it
smart.
whenever
Yeah.
you want. Actually, no, I know you can do that because they did say that. They're like, yeah, if you're in the middle of the campaign, you're like, I'm gonna do the other stuff, the Vessel of Hatred stuff. You can just go do that.
I mean, it's like a Shadow of the Erd Tree approach a little bit, right? Where it's like
Yeah, does it scale?
you just leave, you go to a different area with, like you don't worry about overlapping with the previous stuff. So
Right. You were asking if it does like the level scale.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it scales the same way it does in the base game.
Okay, yeah. Then yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Sure.
So yeah, and it is October 8th.
cool.
Excuse me for Vessel of Hatred. Yeah, if you guys don't have anything else to that you want to touch on, we can get into some housekeeping and answer a few listener questions. That sound good?
Let's do it.
Alrighty, so housekeeping. Once again, you can subscribe to Game Informer, a print subscription for 10 issues for 1 year for just $19.91. Once again, that's less than $2 an issue. If you're watching the video version, you can see Kyle holding up our most recent issue, which is Dragon Age: The Veil Guard. You can spin it around. He's just very, very aggressively really showing it off, but we love it. It's a great magazine, and it's a great way to directly support Game Informer. Once again, that's 10 issues a year for just $19.91, or you can re-up for 2 years for $34.99 and get 20 issues during that period. You can also find each of us on social media. I am on Twitter and pretty much everywhere else is at Marcus Stewart 7. Kyle is at Kyle M. Hilliard. And Charles is at ChuckDuck365. Did I get that right, Charles?
You did.
Okay. I was going purely off memory. All right. And you can also follow Game Informer on social media platforms, including Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky. We'd love it if you followed us wherever you like to consume your bad news of the world, I guess. Wherever you like to doom scroll, please give us a subscription. You can also find us on Twitch at twitch.tv/Game Informer. We have our ongoing, never-ending super replay of The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask, where we made progress this week.
We did.
Or last week, Kyle. Things happened. A lot of things happened. We have like 4 new masks now
We
in
raised
one
a
episode.
giant skeleton. We raised a bunch of chickens. I mean,
What-
Marcus is in charge here.
What dungeon are you guys on?
The 4th one. We're
Heading
approaching
to
the fourth one.
Yeah, but the fourth one
Yeah.
also has maybe the most like pre-build up. There's all those that has the. You have to do the most before the 4th dungeon.
Seems like there's some ghost stuff. I got a Shao Kahn mask that looks kind of cool.
Yeah.
Some things are happening that I'm excited about. So yeah, check that out every Friday on our Twitch channel. And of course, a super special shout out to our awesome podcast editor, Matt Storm, aka DJ Stormageddon. Be sure to follow their podcast, Fun and Games, as well as Reignite, which is a BioWare-focused podcast. And yes, this is the part of the show where you influence what we talk about, which is our listener questions. If you would like to ask us a question on this podcast, you can do so one of 2 ways. You can either email us at podcast@gameinformer.com, or you can join the Game Informer Discord, which you do by subscribing to our Twitch channel just one time and going into the Game Informer Show channel and dropping us a question. I usually go in there the morning of every podcast recording day and pool for some questions. And we've got a few here, a couple left over from last week, but we'll start with Sean via Discord asking, in the year 2030, the same amount of time will have passed from the release of Pong as the time between the Wright brothers' flight and Yuri Gagarin's trip as the first person to outer space, which is 58 years.
Okay.
So the question is, what, if anything, would you label as the first person in outer space moment in the history of video game development? What was the Wright brothers style milestone? Have video games as a craft landed on the moon yet?
This is a funky question. Yeah.
This is a really well thought out question, I feel like.
Now, before we say anything, I think the achievement of leaving Earth's atmosphere and entering space is the more impressive achievement. Just because we're sort of lining them up doesn't mean we're relating the two.
You don't think Pong and Flight are equivalent achievements?
Have we We have sent a video game into space, haven't we? Like in one of those, like,
sure.
kind of like time gift capsules from Earth in case someone finds it, like as a culture thing.
I mean, there was an astronaut that was probably playing Candy Crush just like while they were waiting to take off.
I didn't think.
right?
I thought it was going way further back. Like someone brought a Game Boy up or something. Like
Probably,
Candy
yeah.
Crush.
There's a Game Boy in space. But you know, I think I have a thought here that I don't know if it's the right answer. I don't know if there is a right answer, but I don't know what you guys think.
What is it?
What's
Oh,
mine?
I thought you were gearing up. Were you telling us to go first?
I have one, I think, and I think it is the Switch. I think it is the transition between home and portable console, like a home console, like video game consoles, right? Like there were like arcades, and then then we hit a point where like, well, you can get arcade quality at home. But then there was always that divide between, but then you can't take it out of your house. But the Switch was that point where it was like, you have a console, you can play it on your TV at home, and you literally pick it up and take it out, and it's the same thing, and it's portable. And that felt like magic to me the first time I sort of really used the Switch. So that's my landing on the moon, is the Switch.
I'll take you one further.
Oh.
I think they said by 2030, right?
Yeah.
So I think
So we have
there's
time.
still some time to make this happen. I think like proper cloud gaming is the button that we hit, of like you can just open up your phone and you can play any game, and it's not as much of a question of how good your internet is. Just the idea that like video games transcending physical consoles and just being a thing of like, oh, and like now you can play Game Pass on a TV. Just being like, oh, you have a TV? Can I download this app real quick and then play the new Call of Duty like while I'm in my hotel room and I don't have to, bring my tech along with me? Like I think that's for me the space equivalent is entering the cloud, so to speak.
Gotcha. Because I was about to say is like, well, we can do that now, but it's unreliable. And what you're talking about is like where we don't even perceive a difference, right?
I'm saying give it 6 years, clean it up, tighten it up, make it easier to
Tighten up
make it a smoother experience. Because I've done cloud gaming, but it's always like every few minutes I get like some kind of visual glitch or like it goes out of sync for a second. Like I wouldn't play an action game on the cloud, but I know it's a whole thing in Japan. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's not as crazy to put like a cloud game on Switch. Like there's cloud games on the Switch there that we don't have here because it's a better infrastructure for that sort of thing.
I believe so, yeah.
With that, kind of like going with the, I guess, history of aviation analogy, if that's like what you're describing, the man on the moon moment, would something like Stadia be like the Wright brothers? Like we figured out how to achieve flight. Like
that's setting
like
up
Stadia
a satellite
can do it
without a living person or animal in there. It's like we've left the atmosphere.
Well, I'll say like Stadia is like the Wright brothers playing like we can fly. It's a little shaky and maybe you're not going super high, but you can do it.
But see, I thought that Pong was the Wright brothers.
That's what this metaphor is.
Like Pong,
is that Pong is the starting point?
Yes, like Pong
for everything.
Okay. Yeah, and then it's like within 60 years we were in space, right? It's like we figured out how to fly, and then we were in space 60 years later. So we figured out video games. What is the big thing that we do 60 years later?
Yeah, I guess I condensed it down to like the history of cloud gaming in general. So maybe that I was going to go back to like, what about On Live or something? I don't know, whatever.
On Live was like your crazy neighbor who set up a rocket that went into the atmosphere, and he insisted it went to space, and you're like, all right, dude.
I was gonna say at least like a hot air balloon, or like, well, I can
that
go
went
up.
to space. That was in space. You're like, I bet it was, buddy.
Maybe like I feel like there's multiple good answers for this. Like the smartphone, like just the advent of the smartphone. I know that's because I've had such a profound effect on gaming. Because now, to your Switch analogy, Kyle, you could take games anywhere in a way that even the Game Boy couldn't. Like, because everyone has to have a phone. Everyone has a phone.
Yeah.
So, like, even if you weren't a gamer, you had access to genuinely, like, good games for the first time without having to without requiring any like extra purchase. You know, I didn't have to buy a separate dedicated device. I just have it now because I bought the first iPhone.
Yeah.
And like, for better or worse, you know, people have taken advantage of that in like not great ways. But also, there's been like a myriad of really good mobile games where like, you know, so many people that consider themselves like, oh, I'm not really a gamer, but then I put like 100,000 hours in like Candy Crush or like Threes or something. And to me, I was like, oh no, you are. You just, I don't think I like being a gamer is like. It's to the point now where it barely means anything. It's like saying like, "Oh, I'm a guy that likes movie. I'm a movie person." You're like, everybody watches movies. Like, you know, some people watch it and appreciate it more than others, but it's like it's so like we all watch movies. Nobody goes out and just like, you know, I like movies as like a weird personality trait. And I feel like video games have gotten to that point as much as a lot of like gatekeeper gamers try to push back against like, no. You don't like, you're not a gamer if you only like this kind of like arbitrary thing. Like there's a rule here. Like you only play phone games. You're not a gamer. Like, no, that's
become
not
ubiquitous.
True.
Yeah.
Like, so like, and I feel like the smartphone was like the final like glass shattering of that moment. If we're just talking about like the availability of video games to the mainstream audience, whether we realize it or not. So that, I guess that'll be my answer for this, but yeah, great question, Sean.
I like it. It's weird. It's a weird one. Thinker.
Let's see. Our next one is from Pratable via Discord asking, if any of you that have tried Zenless Zone Zero have also tried Genshin Impact, which did you prefer, and which world design, which would be hub versus open world, and gameplay loop, which would be missions versus open world quests, did you find fits the premium mobile game style that Hoyo is best known for, or known for best? Like, I guess which game fits their premium mobile design better? I mean, I would almost. Yeah.
I haven't touched Zenless Zone Zero really. I played it for like 20 minutes. Even that, I played a bit of Genshin, but I mean, I think you could just based on the success of Genshin, I think you could argue that Genshin is like the one that's sort of defined it, right? Or like, I don't know. Yeah,
and granted, it's been out longer, and so we don't know the the full tale of Zenless Zone Zero where it winds up success-wise. I would almost say maybe Zenless because it's more compartmentalized, the gameplay. Like that just makes it easier to like get in and out of like, I'm gonna do like a mission and then maybe spend money on it than something like more nebulous like an open world where anything can happen at any time at any pace. I don't know, but then maybe that's the reason why the open world would be better, because you're maybe more likely to spend more time in it, so maybe the temptation to spend money is more present. I
guess I don't know if you're saying from a player perspective or a company perspective.
Yeah, I guess that's where I'm trying to figure out, like, should I be looking at this purely from like the business perspective?
Right. I've only played a little Genshin. I haven't played Zenless Zone Zero. But what struck, I was playing it in like my last weeks at Fanbyte because it was a game that just got a lot of like website traffic. So it was like, I should probably be well versed in this if I want to, cover it at some point. And I didn't get very far. And the thing that stood out to me is it was a game that the longer I played it, the more I felt like it just didn't really respect my time. It was like, oh, you can do whatever you want. You just have to spend a million years doing it or give us money. And I was like, well, I don't want to give you money, so I guess I got to spend a million years doing stuff.
Either of those things.
And something about a mission structure is more appealing to me, knowing that was the issue I had with Genshin. But I don't actually know how it feels. I don't know if you have to replay missions a bunch of times to get new rewards, and if it feels as grindy as I felt like Genshin felt. But I'm not the wrong person to answer this question for sure, I guess is the takeaway.
Yeah, so what is our definitive answer? Are we all saying Genshin, or are we all just like, I don't know?
A little bit of a shrug, just because I'm not very close to Genshin, and I haven't played Zenless, yet, and stuff like that.
Where does Honkai Star Rail fit into this is the real question.
That's a great question, because I don't actually know,
because that's like what the
structure of that game is.
That's like a turn-based RPG.
Yeah, it's turn-based, yeah.
Yeah, which I've heard is very good.
Well, like all their games it's really pretty. Like, awesome art style, awesome animation, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that is our answer question mark for that one. Last question, Luke Skywalker via Discord asking, after playing the beta, will Concord manage to carve its path in the very crowded hero shooter space? Does it remind y'all of previous experiences, and if it does, could it capture some of the same magic of those older experiences? Did you guys play the open beta this past weekend?
No, just that first beta.
The closed one?
Yeah, and this is like, it's not a genre I dig deep into. I don't really play online shooters, but I feel like the sentiment was the same across the board, or it was like generally the same as mine, which is like, hey, this is pretty fun. Like this feels good. And then it's a little bit of like, we'll see if any of these characters kind of stick, like none of them really. I found one that I liked a lot. I liked playing as Z, but I'm not like, what's her deal? What's her history? I want to know more about her. I was just like, I don't know. She's like fun and she can teleport.
I mean, and they probably already answered that, right? Because they have like bios that you can just look at.
But I actually have confidence about Concord. I think it will find an audience. I have more confidence in it than I have most comparable shooters, just because it feels so good. It feels good to play.
Do you think it's weird? Because I know what I want from this game, but do you think it should have been free to play? Do you think it would stand a better chance if it was? Because right now it's like, I think it's going to be $40, so like not full price by any means, but like, is that too much of a barrier at this point in the?
I mean,
kind of.
I don't like free to play games like across the board. I am significantly less likely to try and play a game if it's free to play. I don't want to engage in free to play mechanics. I don't like Fortnite, and not just because the Cybertruck is in there now. Like I just don't. I don't want to play those kinds of games. So I recognize that I'm not the typical player necessarily. I'm way more interested in Concord as a premium experience. That's way more enticing to me than going into a free-to-play game and maybe having a good time. But just, I mean, you're always going to see the sort of paywall barriers in any free-to-play game. They're just there by design, and that takes me out of the experience completely. When I play video games, I want to be invested in the world, and I want to live in them. I don't want to think about my wallet at all. You know?
That's kind of where they lost me with Overwatch 2, among other things.
Yeah.
Because, Overwatch 1 was like a premium thing where it's like, this works. And I guess I'm also in that minority of like, I'd rather just pay for a thing up front because at least just like the design can't be infected with any sort of like free to play stuff. Even just like when it's free to play, like you have to design everything with that idea that like we need to get money somehow, even if you're not being super nefarious about it. You just kind of have to, because otherwise, how are you making money?
Yeah, I don't fault that system. Like it's an entertainment business. It's fine, but I don't want to play it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I also like Helldivers 2 isn't free to play, correct?
It is not correct. It is a premium game.
So that's one to me where I'm like, I think if you had asked me this question pre Helldivers 2, I think I maybe would have been up in the air, because I can't think of an instance before that in recent memory of like a newer IP relatively of like, this is a new game, we're trying to break into the space and it's not free to play, because everything seemed to be going in that direction. Then Helldivers 2 was such a big success that it's like, well, there does seem to be an audience there that's interested in doing that. Now, not everything is going to be Helldivers 2. It would be, it's a high bar to set, but I don't think it's impossible, especially because I don't know. I think Overwatch 2 is another great example of like it felt like they figured it out and then they unfigured everything out, and now
they took something that was unscrew-upable and they screwed it up.
Yeah, and then it's a thing of like what don't people like about Overwatch 2? In a broad sense, the fact that it's free to play, like the changes they've made to the structure because of that. So, I do have more faith in the general game design. This is someone who hasn't played Concord but is interested.
Yeah, I guess I agree with you guys. Again, I'm glad that it is the way it is, like premium paid thing. That gives me more confidence just for what I like in these games. it's so hard to tell if it'll catch on. I mean, these betas are giving you like an idea of like, do players latch on to this enough to where they're pre-ordering this game now as they speak, or if they're, is anyone going to show up for, what is it? And the launch isn't that far away. It was like 2 weeks away, something like that. It's like August. So it's not that much time between now and then, but like, will all those players that played come back? Did they like their like really big push into narrative enough to like, I want to know more about Linux and also shoot people in the face. So yeah, that'll be a very fun or like interesting one to kind of track if this winds up being like or just like, oh my god, we got another Helldivers 2 on our hands, folks.
Yeah, we'll see. I don't know if I'm rooting for it. Like I'm always let me rephrase that. I'm always rooting for games to do well. I never want a game to fail. But I'm optimistic about this one, but but at the same time I don't know if it's one that I'm like going to make time in my schedule to play necessarily. But it's also just not my genre, really,
Yeah, it's kind of like I liked what I played, but I have no skin in that game where I liked it enough where I was like, man, I hope this does well because I want to keep playing more of it. I'm kind of just like observing like, oh, this will be interesting to see how people take to this. We'll see.
I hope it does well because I want the people who worked on it to have a satisfying like experience of like, we worked really hard on this and it went well. But I'm not rooting for it in the sense of like, I hope it does well because I want to be able to jump into a server at any time and play.
Sure. Yeah. I don't know if you guys heard that thunder crack, by the way. But
no.
It's going down outside. So I should probably run out there immediately and go get some of that because it is the end of the show, everybody. Thank you so much for watching. Yes, Kyle, I want to go out and get struck by lightning. Was that not clear?
I would prefer you didn't. I'm not
Have
rooting
you not watched
for that.
Just like a story you'd read about Thor. Decided to gather lightning.
Oh, please. I was clearly referencing Powder. The movie Powder.
Oh, okay.
Charles, do you know what the movie Powder is?
Well, here's the thing. John Mulaney makes a joke referencing Powder from the movie Powder.
There we go.
That's the extent of my knowledge of Powder.
I think, is Powder worth going back to watch? Should Charles go watch Powder today?
No. There's so many better old movies that I'm sure Charles hasn't seen instead of Powder.
Wait, does Powder go outside to collect? The John Mulaney joke is, I went outside about as much as Powder from the movie Powder. Cue laughter.
Cue laughter.
So I assumed Powder was the shut-in that would never go outside. Now you're telling me Powder collects lightning?
Marcus, I believe he gets superpowers after being struck by lightning, but not like comic book movie style, but
not
like,
in a cool way.
Yeah, not in a cool way. Like we're medically worried about this albino child.
He's now very sick.
Yeah.
But wait, is that superpowers or just regularly getting?
Well,
but
his body reacts to electricity different from what I remember.
Okay.
I've not seen the movie since I was a kid in the 90s, but it used to come on HBO quite often. I just remember the ending where he becomes lightning.
Yeah, he has like electrical powers or something, but he's sick.
He's like he kind of looks like Voldemort if he was a child.
Yeah.
But still had his nose. He's kind of got like that complexion, like very pasty and bald.
Oh, I can see the reflection in your glasses, Charles. It looks like you're actively buying Powder on voodoo.com so you can watch it right away. Is that what I'm seeing?
What's crazy is both my hands are in frame, but I have a second mouse and keyboard down by my feet through which I'm doing this at.
So you got one of those foot pedals.
Directed Powder. Let me see.
Powder came out in 1995, by the way. We both Googled Powder. You're like, Jeff Goldblum was in Powder. Yeah. That's right.
Who plays Powder? Who's the titular Powder?
It was Sean Patrick
one of the Boondock
Flair.
Saints. Yeah.
Yeah.
From the director of Jeepers Creepers and Jeepers Creepers 2.
Apparently, the film was a financial success. I
was a hit, man. Movies were weird back then.
So much today.
Do some weird stuff.
It got mixed reviews, but it made money, which is really weird, even for 1995. That would be the one where, like, oh yeah, people were really wanting to see this lightning kid get sick.
We didn't have, we were trying to make do with Batman, and we're like, this is the closest thing to a superhero movie that we got. We can't be waiting around for Batman Forever.
The night, well, at least not till Batman Forever already came out at that point.
It was it 95? I thought maybe Forever was like 96 or something.
Oh no, same year, 95.
Oh, Mary Steenburgen's in this too.
Hold
on,
yeah.
do we?
What a great year for
Powder?
cinema. I think we need to watch Powder.
I hope for this episode of the Game Informer show, where we make the thumbnail, I hope Powder from Powder is the biggest character in the little lineup.
I'm going to tell Lele, we really got into Powder, by the way. Can you make sure that's in the header?
Shout out to Lele, who, when I give her requests like that, she's always kind of like, sure, whatever, man. Like, she doesn't ask a lot of questions. She's like, yes. All right, yeah.
Yeah, Lele, one of our graphic designers, by the way, for listeners. Yes. Alrighty, let's get out of here, and I guess let's go have a Powder watch party. How's it sound, guys?
Wow.
Let's do it.
All right, thanks for listening, guys. We'll see you next Thursday for another episode of the Game Informer Show. Bye-bye.